The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and old paper, the kind of place where lives changed with the stroke of a pen. Bella adjusted her purse on her shoulder, her fingers gripping the strap a little too tightly. She hated being here, hated the fluorescent lights that made everything look lifeless, hated the way the worn-out bench cushions dug into her legs as she waited for her name to be called. But most of all, she hated that this wasn't over yet. She had fought so hard for Hazel, had given up nights of sleep and spent hours on the phone with lawyers, scraping together the money to make sure her daughter was safe. Derek had never wanted to be a father, but the moment she had filed for full custody, he'd suddenly developed an interest. Not in Hazel, of course. Just in winning. Bella Sutton? The clerk's voice cut through her thoughts. She stood quickly, smoothing her blouse as she approached the counter. A thick stack of papers was pushed toward her, the weight of bureaucracy pressing down. "Just sign on the highlighted lines," the woman said, barely glancing up. "This finalizes everything." Bella exhaled. This was it. The custody agreement. The end of this nightmare. She skimmed the papers, but exhaustion blurred the words. All she could see was Hazel's smile, the way she curled into Bella's arms after a bad dream, the way she giggled when Bella danced around the kitchen making pancakes. Everything she was doing was for her daughter, and if signing a few forms meant Hazel's stability, she'd do it. She reached for the pen, scrawling her name where the neon tabs indicated. 1, 2, 3. The clerk took the papers back, flipping through them before nodding. "Congratulations." That was a strange way to phrase it, but Bella didn't care. She just wanted to get out of here. She turned to leave, but a deep voice stopped her in her tracks. "Well, Mrs. Hawthorne, I guess we're married now." Her breath caught. That name. Hawthorne. But, no. That was impossible. She turned slowly, eyes locking onto a man she had never seen before, yet something about him felt disturbingly familiar. He stood with the confidence of someone who was used to getting his way, dressed in a dark suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. His sharp jawline, piercing gray eyes, and the faintest hint of amusement playing on his lips, it was unsettling how much he looked like Derek. "Who?" Her throat tightened. "Miles Hawthorne," he said smoothly, as if that explained everything. Her pulse pounded. She glanced at the clerk, then at the papers in the woman's hand, her stomach twisting into a knot that pulled tighter with every second. What did I just sign?" The clerk, still disinterested, tapped the stack. "Marriage certificate." No. No, no, no. That was not possible. She had signed custody papers. She had walked in here to secure her daughter's future, not. Her hands shook as she grabbed the documents, her eyes darting across the text. And there it was. Her name, next to Miles Hawthorne's. A legal, binding marriage. Her heart slammed against her ribs. This is a mistake. Miles leaned against the counter, watching her unravel with an infuriating sense of ease. Apparently not. The clerk, clearly used to dramatic courthouse mishaps, merely shrugged. "It happens more often than you think. Paperwork mix-ups. You'll have to file for an annulment if you want to undo it." Annulment. Yes. That was exactly what she needed. But before she could even begin to process how to fix this, Miles shifted closer, his voice lowering just enough to make her stomach drop. "I wouldn't be so hasty," he said. Her hands clenched into fists. "Excuse me?" Miles's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something calculating. "I believe this marriage gives me a claim to custody of Hazel." She forgot how to breathe. The room swayed, and she had to steady herself against the counter. He couldn't be serious. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Miles continued, unbothered. "I assume Derek hasn't told you about me." The nausea crawled up her throat. Told me what? That we're twins. She stared at him, the weight of those words hitting her all at once. She had known Derek for years, had shared a life with him, had a child with him, and not once had he ever mentioned a twin. She shook her head, stepping back. No. You're lying. Miles tilted his head, studying her reaction like she was an interesting puzzle. I assure you, I'm not. He and I share the same DNA, the same legal lineage. Which means that if you're married to me, and I petition for custody, I might just have a case. Her skin went cold. You're insane. Maybe. He slipped his hands into his pockets, completely unaffected by the chaos he had just unleashed into her world. But I'm also very, very serious. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Why would you even want custody? You don't know Hazel. You don't know me. Miles's smirk faded slightly. I know enough. That answer terrified her more than anything. She turned back to the clerk, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Fix this. Right now. The woman sighed, clearly unimpressed by Bella's unraveling. As I said, you'll need to file for an annulment. That takes time. Bella's stomach twisted. How much time? A few weeks, if processed quickly. Maybe longer if there's a dispute. A dispute. She snapped her gaze back to Miles, her chest tightening. You wouldn't. The slight lift of his brow told her otherwise. He would absolutely fight this. She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw something. But more than anything, she wanted to grab Hazel and run as far away as possible from this mess. Miles finally pushed away from the counter, adjusting his cufflinks like this was just another minor business meeting for him. I'll be in touch, Mrs. Hawthorne. She watched, helpless, as he strode out of the courthouse with the confidence of a man who had just secured a victory. Bella swallowed the rising panic, her mind spiraling. She had walked into this building expecting to fight Derek. She never could have imagined she'd leave legally bound to his twin. Bella stormed out of the courthouse, her heels clacking against the pavement with a force that made pedestrians glance up from their phones. She barely noticed. The papers in her hand crumpled under her grip, her nails digging into them as if sheer force could undo what had just happened. Bella, wait. The sound of his voice sent a fresh surge of anger through her. She spun around, her breath sharp. Miles stood there, unbothered, his suit crisp and untouched by the chaos he had just caused. It was infuriating. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't march back in there and file for an annulment right now. His lips quirked, the faintest shadow of a smirk, like this was some sort of amusing misunderstanding. Because I won't sign it. Her vision went white-hot. What do you mean you won't sign it? Miles stepped forward, hands in his pockets, like they were discussing dinner plans instead of an accidental marriage. I mean, I don't intend to undo it. Her laugh was short and humorless. That's not how this works. You don't get to decide that. He tilted his head, studying her like she was an interesting puzzle. Actually, I do. She wanted to scream. He exhaled, glancing around at the people passing by, then gestured toward a bench near the courthouse steps. Can we sit? Absolutely not. He didn't look surprised. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I get it. This is a mess. But I need you to understand something before you make up your mind. Her arms crossed so tightly it felt like she was holding herself together. There's nothing to understand. This was a mistake. A clerical error. That's all. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. It wasn't. The certainty in his voice made her stomach flip. Derek never told you about me, did he? Her mouth opened, then closed. She wanted to say, of course he did, but the truth sat like a stone in her throat. Miles nodded, as if he had expected that. I figured. She swallowed hard. Why would he? Miles let out a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. Because I'm his twin. The world tilted slightly. No. That couldn't be right. You're lying. I'm not. Her head shook, as if that could erase his words. Derek never mentioned a brother. Not once. Miles's expression was unreadable. Of course he didn't. Something uneasy settled in her chest. You're making this up. I wish I were. The cars passing on the street, the low hum of conversation from people walking by, the rustling of leaves in the slight breeze, it all felt suddenly too loud. She stared at him. How? His jaw clenched, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked uneasy. Our mother gave me up for adoption when we were born. The words landed heavily between them. Bella's breath caught. Miles looked past her, his eyes on something in the distance. She didn't have the means to raise 2 kids. So she picked one. Bella's stomach twisted. She picked Derek. A sharp nod. Her hands loosened their grip on the papers. She never told him. She didn't tell anyone. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something deeper, something that had probably been simmering inside him for a long time. Her head felt light. How do you even know any of this? His shoulders rose and fell, as if he had explained this story too many times before. I found out when I was 25. My adoptive parents had passed, and a lawyer handling their estate gave me my original birth records. His jaw tightened. That's when I found out I had a twin. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until she had to remind herself to exhale. She tried to picture it, growing up thinking you had no family, no real ties, only to discover you had a brother who had been given everything while you had been left behind. Something about that realization made her heart ache in a way she hadn't been prepared for. I tracked Derek down, Miles continued. Hoped he'd want to meet me. Thought maybe it was some kind of mistake. But he made it very clear he didn't want a brother. The words felt like ice. She thought of Derek, his arrogance, his ability to cut people off without looking back. It shouldn't have surprised her. And yet. What did he say? Miles's expression didn't change. He called me a mistake. Said our mother had made the right choice. A sickening feeling curled in her stomach. Miles's voice remained even, controlled. So I left him alone. She blinked. But you're here now. His gaze flickered. I looked into him after that. Just out of curiosity. Curiosity. She had a feeling Miles didn't do anything out of simple curiosity. And that's how you found me, she said quietly. His eyes met hers. That's how I found Hazel. Her chest tightened. There was something in the way he said it, calm, measured, but with just enough of an edge that she knew the thought had kept him awake at night. Miles exhaled, tapping his fingers lightly against the dashboard. It didn't take long to see that Derek had everything. A stable home. Money. Opportunities. And he wasted all of it. Bella swallowed, keeping her voice steady. You mean his terrible life choices? That's one way to put it. Miles reached for the folder he had placed on the dashboard earlier and slid it toward her. I had someone dig into his finances, his records. I assumed he was just reckless, but then I found this. She hesitated, then flipped open the folder. A few neatly printed reports, bank statements, even an arrest record. Nothing that surprised her. Derek had always been a mess, but then she saw Hazel's name. Her stomach dropped. What is this? A record of every time he's paid child support late. Every canceled visit. Every complaint filed against him. She gripped the pages, feeling sick. She had spent years documenting his failures, trying to prove what she already knew, that Derek wasn't fit to be in Hazel's life. But no one had ever really listened. Miles watched her reaction. I saw enough to know I couldn't ignore it. She let out a sharp breath. And you think that just because you discovered this, you suddenly have the right to get involved? His expression didn't change. I think someone has to. Her fingers curled around the folder. Not you. Miles leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. You're right. It shouldn't be me. It should have been someone else, a grandparent, an uncle, anyone. But there is no one, Bella. No one except you. And now, me. She shook her head, willing her pulse to slow. This is crazy. I don't even know you. And yet, here we are. She hated how calm he was. He continued, his voice quiet but firm. I know this is overwhelming. But I'm not going anywhere. She glared at him. And if I fight you on this? Miles's jaw tightened slightly. Then we go to court. Her whole body tensed. He let the words settle before adding, but I don't want it to come to that. She pressed her fingers against her temple. And what do you want, Miles? I want Hazel to be safe. Bella let out a bitter laugh. And you think a legal technicality makes you her savior? Miles didn't flinch. No. I think it gives me the ability to stop Derek before he does real damage. Her throat tightened. You don't even know her. That's not her fault. The words hung between them. Bella gritted her teeth. You're asking me to trust you with my daughter. I'm asking you to trust me to do what Derek never will. Her chest ached with the weight of it all. Miles exhaled, his voice softer now. I know this isn't fair. I know you don't want me here. But you have to ask yourself, what happens when Derek finally decides Hazel isn't worth the effort anymore? Her breath caught. She had spent 6 years waiting for that moment. And deep down, she knew it was coming. But that didn't mean she was ready to let Miles Hawthorne be the one to step in. The pounding on Bella's front door rattled the picture frames on the wall. It was the kind of knocking that made her stomach turn, the kind that told her exactly who was on the other side before she even reached for the handle. She barely had time to take a breath before Derek's voice cut through the thin wood. Open the damn door, Bella. Hazel was in her room, playing with her dolls, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the entryway. Bella took a steadying breath and swung the door open, already bracing for impact. Derek pushed past her before she could say a word, his presence filling the small living room like an infection. He smelled like expensive cologne and bad decisions, the same combination that had fooled her once upon a time. His dark eyes flicked over her before landing on Miles, who stood by the window, perfectly still, perfectly composed, as if he had been expecting this exact moment. Derek let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. Unbelievable. He turned back to Bella, amusement flickering across his face. You accidentally married my long-lost twin? That's rich, even for you. Bella's jaw clenched. Get out. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. He stuffed his hands into the pockets of his leather jacket, shifting his weight like he had all the time in the world. I came to see the man who thinks he can just waltz into my life and take what's mine. Miles finally moved, turning to face him with a kind of ease that only made Derek more furious. What's yours? His voice was cool, almost amused. Interesting choice of words. Derek scoffed, giving Miles a once-over. You think because you have a little money, you can just buy your way into a family? He shook his head, grinning like this was all some inside joke. Let me guess, you're hoping Bella will fall for the whole knight in shining armor act? Is that it? Trying to play daddy? Miles didn't blink. I'm trying to make sure a little girl doesn't get caught in the crossfire of your games. Derek's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Bella took a step forward, fury burning under her skin. Don't act like you care about Hazel. Derek turned to her, still smirking, but there was something darker behind it now. Of course, I care about her, he said, his tone mocking. She's useful. A sharp breath caught in Bella's throat. Miles's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed ever so slightly. Useful how? Derek spread his arms, grinning. You think I've been dragging out this custody battle because I want to play catch in the yard and braid her hair? Please. His eyes gleamed with something sickening. I just don't like making things easy for Bella. Bella's nails dug into her palms. She had known this, of course. She had felt it every time he showed up late for a visit or canceled at the last minute just to watch her scramble. But hearing him say it out loud, so casually, made her blood run cold. Miles took a step closer. You're admitting that you've been using your daughter as leverage? Derek shrugged. Leverage, entertainment, call it whatever you want. Bella's voice wavered with rage. You're disgusting. Derek turned to her, smirk firmly in place. Oh, spare me the dramatics. You're the one who got yourself into this mess. You signed a marriage certificate without reading it. And now my twin brother, who I never asked for, by the way, thinks he's going to outmaneuver me? He barked out a laugh. I don't think so. Miles adjusted his cufflinks, calm as ever. Actually, that's exactly what's going to happen. Derek's grin faded. Miles took another step, closing the space between them, lowering his voice just enough to turn it into something lethal. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign over full custody to Bella. Permanently. No more visitation, no more games. You walk away, and you leave them alone. Derek's amusement returned, though it looked a little more forced now. Or what? Miles pulled a folder from the end table and tossed it onto the coffee table between them. Or I drag you through court. And not just for custody. Derek's jaw twitched. What's this? Proof that you shouldn't be within 10 feet of a child, let alone raising one. Bella swallowed hard as Derek flipped through the pages. Bank records. Debt. A list of missed child support payments. A few names of people she didn't recognize, but Miles clearly did. Derek's expression darkened. This is nothing. Miles's lips twitched, just slightly. Oh, that's adorable. You really think so? Derek slammed the folder shut. You think you can blackmail me? No, Derek. Miles leaned in just enough to make the room feel smaller. I think I can bury you. A tense silence settled over the room. Derek's hands curled into fists at his sides. He was used to holding all the power, to calling the shots. But for the first time, there was someone standing in front of him who wasn't afraid. Bella held her breath, watching him, waiting for his next move. He let out a slow breath, forcing another smirk. You really think you can take me down? Miles smiled, but it wasn't warm. I don't think. I know. Derek's jaw tensed, but he covered it with a laugh, shaking his head. You're just like her, you know that? Bella's shoulders stiffened. Derek turned to her, tilting his head. You both actually think you're better than me. She didn't flinch. We are. His smirk flickered. Miles stepped between them, his voice like steel. You have two choices. Sign the papers and walk away quietly, or go to war with me and lose everything. Derek stared at him, weighing his options. Bella held her breath. And then, with one last glance at Miles, Derek let out a quiet chuckle and took a step back. You think you've won something today? He shook his head. This isn't over. Miles didn't move. It is for you. Derek's grin sharpened as he turned to Bella. Enjoy your new husband. And with that, he walked out, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Bella let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her forehead. Miles exhaled, rolling his shoulders back like he was shaking off the last of the confrontation. Well, that went about as expected. She turned to him, her pulse still racing. I don't even know what just happened. Miles met her gaze, his expression unreadable. You just watched Derek realize he's not the smartest person in the room. Her chest tightened. She wasn't sure if she should feel relieved or terrified. Miles wheeled his suitcase into Bella's house like he owned the place. He had barely stepped over the threshold before Bella grabbed the handle, yanking it back toward the door. Absolutely not. He didn't fight her grip, just arched a brow and let out a measured breath. Bella, be reasonable. Reasonable? She let go of the suitcase so suddenly that he had to catch himself from toppling backward. You tricked me into staying married, threatened Derek into a corner, and now you think you can just move in? I'm not thinking it, I'm doing it. She was going to scream. Right there, in the middle of her modest living room, next to Hazel's stack of toys and the coat rack missing a few pegs, she was going to lose her mind. Instead, she inhaled sharply and lowered her voice, aware that Hazel was just down the hall. You don't live here, Miles. He folded his arms, impossibly calm. Legally, I do. She squeezed her eyes shut for half a second before glaring up at him. That is the worst thing you've ever said. You should hear what I don't say. She was going to throw something. Preferably at his too perfect face. Miles ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. Look. The court date is coming up. Right now, you're married to me, which means the judge will be looking at what kind of household Hazel is in. A stable, two-parent environment will work in your favor. Her eyes narrowed. So what, you're just going to play house for a few weeks? If that's what it takes. A bitter laugh escaped her. This is insane. Maybe, he admitted. But it's also strategic. She pinched the bridge of her nose, willing the stress headache to go away. Where exactly were you planning on sleeping, Mr. Strategic? He glanced around the living room, then back at her. Couch is fine. Oh, fantastic. Now she'd have a 6'2" billionaire taking up space on her sofa, probably judging her threadbare throw pillows and mismatched coffee mugs. She turned to the stairs, muttering, unbelievable. Bella. She stopped but didn't turn around. This is for Hazel. Her jaw tightened. She knew that. It didn't make her any less furious. By day 2, Bella was convinced she had made a terrible mistake. Miles was everywhere. In her kitchen, using her coffee maker like it belonged to him. In her living room, reading the newspaper like some retired old man. Even in her laundry room, looking entirely too put together while pulling his freshly pressed shirts from the dryer. She hated it. She was used to moving through her home in controlled chaos, packing Hazel's lunch while listening to the morning news, throwing on a jacket while signing a school permission slip. Now, every time she turned around, Miles was there, standing in her space like a piece of furniture she couldn't move. The worst part? He didn't seem fazed by any of it. You're in my way, she muttered one morning as she reached for the cereal. You're in mine, he replied, flipping through a case file at the table. She whirled on him. This is my house. And I'm your husband. She picked up a spoon and seriously considered throwing it at his head. Hazel, on the other hand, was thriving. She had warmed up to Miles with a speed that made Bella's stomach clench. She watched as Hazel sat next to Miles on the couch, eyes wide as he showed her how to fold a paper crane. You know origami? Bella asked from the kitchen, arms crossed. Miles glanced up. Lived with a foster mom who was obsessed with it. It kept us busy. Hazel beamed up at him. Can we do another one? Bella gritted her teeth. Hazel had never been this comfortable around Derek. Never looked at him with that kind of quiet admiration. She had been wary of her father's presence since she was old enough to sense disappointment. But Miles? Miles, who had been a stranger just days ago, was somehow getting past every wall Bella had carefully built. She turned away before her daughter could see the tension in her face. That night, she found Miles in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as he poured himself a glass of water. Stop it. He set the glass down. Stop what? Whatever it is you're doing with Hazel. He frowned. I'm not doing anything. That's the problem. Her arms tightened around herself. She likes you. Miles watched her carefully. And that's bad? She let out a slow breath. You're not staying. His jaw twitched. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you're not her father, and you never will be. A muscle ticked in his jaw. You think I don't know that? Then stop acting like you belong here. He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. I'm not trying to replace Derek. Good. Her voice cracked slightly. Because Hazel doesn't need another person to disappear on her. Miles's expression changed. The sharp edges softened, just enough to reveal something deeper. I wish I had someone like you fighting for me when I was a kid. Her breath caught. For the first time, she saw it, the weight of it all. The years of being discarded. The exhaustion of trying to prove he deserved a place in the world. She had been so focused on keeping him out that she hadn't realized he wasn't trying to take anything from her. He was trying to keep Hazel from knowing what it felt like to be left behind. And that terrified her more than anything. Bella stood in the doorway, watching as Miles leaned over the kitchen table, helping Hazel with her math homework. His sleeves were rolled up, the sharp lines of his usual tailored suit softened by the dim light overhead. Hazel, pencil in hand, was explaining something animatedly while Miles listened, nodding in all the right places. Bella should have been relieved. Hazel had never been this at ease with Derek. With her father, every interaction was strained, a performance Bella had to coax along with reminders to say hello to Daddy and give him a hug when he picked her up. But with Miles, she wasn't hesitant or guarded. She was just Hazel. And that terrified Bella. She stepped into the room, arms crossed. It's past her bedtime. Hazel groaned dramatically. We're almost done. Bella ignored her, locking eyes with Miles. She has school tomorrow. Miles put his hands up in mock surrender. All right. I'll let the boss handle it. He tapped the homework sheet. You did good, kid. Hazel beamed, scooping up her papers and running off to her room. Bella waited until she heard the bedroom door shut before speaking. You don't need to do that. Do what? Play the perfect stepfather. Miles exhaled, shaking his head slightly. I'm not playing anything, Bella. She asked for help, so I helped. Bella clenched her jaw. She's going to get attached to you. She's a kid, he said simply. Kids get attached to the people who show up for them. Bella's throat tightened. And what happens when you don't? Miles's expression flickered, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood, grabbed his suit jacket from the chair, and walked past her. Bella didn't sleep well that night. By the next afternoon, she was dreading Derek's arrival. She always did. The court-mandated drop-offs were a necessary evil, a time slot carved out of her week that she could never fully relax into, no matter how much she prepared. She stood outside with Hazel, who clutched her backpack while humming to herself. Miles stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the street like a bodyguard. Derek's car pulled up, sleek and obnoxiously expensive, a glaring reminder that some people failed upwards. He barely glanced at Hazel as he got out, instead shooting Bella an amused look. "So, how's married life?" Bella ignored him. "She has everything she needs in her bag." Derek smirked. "Do I get a hug, sweetheart?" Hazel hesitated, shifting on her feet. Bella's stomach twisted. She knew that hesitation too well. Before Hazel could decide, Derek sighed dramatically. "Come on, kid. Don't be like your mother." Miles moved before Bella could react. His voice was smooth but firm. "Watch your tone." Derek scoffed, looking him over. "Or what?" Miles didn't rise to the bait. "She's 6, Derek. Don't talk to her like she owes you something." For a split second, something flashed across Derek's face, irritation, maybe even embarrassment. But then the smirk was back. "Relax, big brother. Just making conversation." Miles didn't blink. "Take her and go." Derek rolled his eyes but opened the car door for Hazel. She climbed in silently, her tiny shoulders stiff. As Derek got into the driver's seat, he grinned at Bella. "Enjoy your new husband while it lasts." Miles didn't move until the car disappeared down the street. Bella released the breath she'd been holding, then turned to Miles. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She studied him, unsure of what to make of the way his jaw was still tight. "Why do you care so much?" Miles let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. "Because I know what it's like." Bella frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then leaned against the porch railing. "I had a foster dad who used to talk to me like that. Like I owed him something just for existing." Her stomach clenched. Miles's voice was quieter now. "I remember thinking, if I was just a little better, a little quieter, maybe he'd like me more. Maybe I wouldn't get sent to another home." He exhaled sharply. "Took me years to realize it wasn't me. It was him." Bella's throat felt tight. "I don't want Hazel to feel that way," he added. Something in her softened. She had spent so much time trying to figure out what Miles's motives were, whether he was just some rich man playing hero, whether he was trying to control things the way Derek did. But this wasn't control. This wasn't strategy. This was a man who had grown up knowing what it felt like to be unwanted, and he wasn't about to let another kid feel that way if he could help it. The thought unsettled her. Before she could figure out how to respond, her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer. Her stomach dropped. "Bella, Derek is planning to bring up your financial history in court. He's claiming you're struggling too much to provide a stable home." Her pulse roared in her ears. She had known this was a possibility, but seeing it spelled out in black and white made her want to throw something. Miles noticed the shift in her expression. "What?" She barely looked up. "Derek's trying to make me look like an unfit mother." Miles's face darkened. "On what grounds?" Bella let out a bitter laugh. "On the grounds that I don't have a trust fund." He was quiet for a long moment. "Do you need money?" Her spine stiffened. "I'm not taking your money." "Bella." "No," she shoved her phone into her pocket, jaw tight. "I can handle this." His gaze didn't waver. "You shouldn't have to." She turned away before he could see the exhaustion creeping into her features. The next day, she found out he had paid off her debts. It hit her like a slap. She stood in the kitchen, gripping the receipt from her landlord, her hands shaking. She barely heard Miles walk in. He took one look at her expression and exhaled. "Bella. Don't." She turned, fury lighting up every nerve in her body. You had no right. His jaw tensed. I was trying to help. I don't need your help. You need to keep custody of your daughter, he countered, voice calm but firm. She clenched her fists. And you think throwing money at the problem is the solution? If it keeps Derek from taking her, yes. Her chest rose and fell sharply. You don't get to make decisions for me. I'm not your enemy, Bella. Then stop acting like one. The silence between them was thick, charged. Miles ran a hand through his hair, sighing. I did what I thought was right. She swallowed, throat tight. You don't get to decide what's right for me. His voice was quiet. I know. She wanted to stay angry. She needed to stay angry. But under all that rage was something worse, fear. Fear that he was right. Fear that she wasn't strong enough to fight Derek alone. Fear that she might actually want Miles to stay. Bella had just settled onto the couch with a lukewarm cup of coffee when the knock at the door sent her stomach into freefall. It wasn't a delivery. It wasn't a neighbor. Knocks like that never brought good news. She set her mug down too hard, sloshing coffee over the rim. When she swung the door open, a woman in a crisp blazer and a polite but serious expression stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. Miss Sutton? I'm Natalie Briggs from Child and Family Services. We're conducting a routine home visit as part of the custody review. Bella's fingers curled around the edge of the door. Routine visit. Right. Because nothing in her life was ever not a test. Behind her, Miles's voice was steady. Please, come in. Bella turned just in time to see him standing by the kitchen counter, completely unbothered. He had his sleeves rolled up, like he had just been casually preparing breakfast in their perfectly normal, stable, loving home. She wanted to throw something at him. Instead, she stepped aside, forcing a tight smile. Of course. Natalie walked in, her sharp eyes scanning everything. The toys neatly stacked in the corner, the clean but slightly worn furniture, the framed crayon drawings on the fridge. Bella could practically feel her evaluating each detail, assigning scores in some invisible column labeled fit mother or impending disaster. Hazel bounced into the room, bright and smiling. Hi. Natalie's expression softened. Hi, sweetheart. Can I ask you a few questions? Hazel nodded eagerly, already dragging Natalie toward the couch. Bella clenched her jaw. She had spent years making sure Hazel felt safe, happy, protected. The idea that a stranger could walk in and determine if she was enough based on a 15-minute visit made her want to scream. And then, just when she thought she couldn't feel any more tightly wound, Miles turned on the charm. It's been amazing watching them together, he said smoothly, stepping beside Bella like he had always belonged there. Hazel is a force of nature. Every day, she reminds me what's really important. Bella's spine went rigid. Was he performing? Natalie glanced up from her notes, nodding thoughtfully. She seems very comfortable with you. Miles smiled like a man who didn't have a single skeleton in his closet. She's a great kid. And Bella, he glanced at her, something soft and believable in his expression. She's the best mother I've ever seen. Bella had to physically stop herself from choking. The visit continued with Miles being engaging, warm, thoughtful, all the things she didn't need from him right now. When Natalie asked about discipline methods, he gave a measured answer about respect and communication. When she inquired about their parenting approach, he smoothly referenced structure and stability like he had been co-raising Hazel since birth. Bella couldn't even speak. She was too busy grinding her teeth into dust. Then came the moment that nearly ended her. Natalie turned to Hazel with an easy smile. What do you like most about living here? Hazel grinned. I love that Miles makes pancakes with smiley faces. Bella couldn't breathe. Not because Hazel was happy. Not because Miles was lying. But because it was true. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hazel wasn't supposed to like him this much. He wasn't supposed to fit. Natalie finished her notes, smiling. I think I have everything I need. Bella followed her to the door, her stomach twisting as Natalie added, You have a lovely home. And it's clear Hazel is thriving. Bella bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. After Natalie left, Bella spun toward Miles, fists clenched. What the hell was that? Miles calmly shut the door behind him, turning to face her. That was me making sure Derek doesn't win. She threw up her hands. By playing the role of devoted husband? By making sure we don't look like a disaster in front of a court official. Bella let out a bitter laugh. Oh, well, thank you for saving me from myself. Miles exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Bella. Don't Bella me. She took a step closer, fury bubbling in her chest. Do you know how insulting that was? Watching you pretend to be this perfect husband, this perfect father, like I haven't been doing this alone for years? His eyes darkened. I wasn't pretending about Hazel. Her breath hitched. His voice was quieter now. You think I don't mean it when I say she's amazing? She hated that she didn't have an answer for that. His expression softened, just slightly. Look, I know you don't want me here. But today was important. Her hands curled into fists. She's my daughter. Not yours. Miles held her gaze. I know that. Her chest was heaving, but the worst part was, he actually did know that. And yet, he had still stepped in. Still acted like he belonged. And Hazel, damn her, had let him. She swallowed hard. I don't need your help. Miles nodded, but there was something knowing in his eyes. If that were true, you wouldn't be so scared. Bella almost threw something at his stupid, unreadable face. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed upstairs, slamming her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. That night, she barely slept. Meanwhile, Derek was hatching a plan. The next morning, Bella's lawyer called. We have a problem. Bella set down her coffee, already dreading the words about to come out of his mouth. What did he do now? He filed a motion claiming Miles is manipulating you to gain custody. Her stomach plummeted. Are you kidding me? He's arguing that Miles is using you as a legal loophole. That the marriage is a fraud. Bella pressed her fingers against her temples. This is insane. Her lawyer sighed. Derek's goal is to cast doubt on everything. If the court thinks Miles is controlling the situation, it could backfire on you. She clenched her jaw. What do I do? For now? Nothing. But be prepared, this could get ugly. Bella hung up, heart pounding. She turned, and Miles was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. I take it that was bad news. She exhaled sharply. Derek's claiming this marriage is a scam. Miles's expression didn't change. Let him. Bella threw up her hands. Oh, great plan. Let's just do nothing while Derek sets the whole courthouse on fire. Miles's voice was steady. He's scrambling. That means he's desperate. Bella let out a bitter laugh. Or it means he knows exactly how to tear my life apart. Miles took a slow step forward. Then let me stop him. She met his gaze, something burning in her chest. She had spent so long fighting alone, she didn't know how to not be at war with the world. And now, somehow, Miles Hawthorne was standing in the trenches beside her. And she wasn't sure if that made things better. Or worse. Bella was unraveling. It wasn't a slow, graceful unraveling either, it was messy and volatile, like pulling a single loose thread only to realize your entire sweater is coming apart in your hands. She had spent years holding herself together with sheer will, but now? Now, she felt like she was hanging on by her fingernails. She stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her so hard that the windows rattled. Miles barely looked up from where he was standing by the kitchen counter, pouring himself a glass of water like he hadn't just turned her life into a circus act. He didn't even flinch when she threw her bag onto the table. "Say it." Her voice shook. "Tell me how this is all part of your perfect little plan." Miles set the glass down with infuriating calm. "Bella. Don't." She pointed at him, rage thick in her throat. "You don't get to talk to me like I'm some pawn in your custody strategy." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. She took a shaky breath, the weight of everything pressing down on her at once. The court hearing tomorrow. The investigators' report. Derek digging into her finances like she was some unfit disaster. And now, Miles, standing there like he had any idea what it felt like to fight every single day just to keep your child safe. Her voice cracked. "You don't know what it's like to fight for your child every day." Miles's eyes flickered, something unreadable in them. She let out a bitter laugh, swiping at the tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You can just throw money at problems until they disappear. You don't know what it's like to wake up every morning and wonder if today is the day everything falls apart. You don't know what it's like to spend years trying to prove you're enough, only to have some entitled man walk in and act like he can do it better." Her breath hitched, and she hated how small she felt, how exhausted, how completely wrecked. Miles exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Then his voice came, low and steady. "And you don't know what it's like to be the child who wasn't fought for." Bella's stomach clenched. Miles stepped closer, his expression raw in a way she had never seen before. "You think I had it easy? You think being passed around from one foster home to another felt like safety?" His voice was rough now, like he was dragging something out of himself he didn't want to say. "I grew up knowing I was the kid no one wanted. That I was the one who got left behind." She swallowed hard, but he wasn't done. "I spent my entire childhood wondering what I had done wrong. If I was too much, or not enough, or if I had cried too loud as a baby and made it easy for her to let me go." He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "So yeah, Bella. I don't know what it's like to fight for a child. But I know exactly what it's like to be the one no one fought for." The words sat between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. For the first time, Bella realized they had been fighting the same battle, just from opposite sides. She pressed her fingers against her temples, forcing herself to breathe. She wasn't ready for this, for him, for the way his voice made her feel like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She should say something. Apologize. Acknowledge it. But she couldn't. So she did what she always did when things got too real. She turned and walked away. The courtroom was colder than she expected. Bella sat beside Miles, her hands clenched in her lap as she forced herself to breathe evenly. The judge flipped through the case file, expression unreadable. "I have a few concerns regarding this arrangement," she finally said, glancing up. "This marriage happened under unusual circumstances." Bella's heart pounded. The judge's gaze landed on her. "Mrs. Hawthorne, would you say your marriage is stable?" Bella opened her mouth. But no words came. Panic crawled up her spine. She could feel Derek watching her from across the room, his smirk like a blade against her skin. If she hesitated now, if she gave even a hint of doubt, Derek would tear her apart. But before she could even process what was happening, Miles spoke. "I love her." The words sliced through the tension like a knife. Bella's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. The judge arched a brow. "Mr. Hawthorne?" Miles didn't look at Bella. He kept his eyes on the judge, voice even. I love my wife. Her breath caught. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't strategic. It was just said. Bella's pulse pounded in her ears. Was it part of his plan? Was it just another move in the never-ending game of winning and losing? Or was it real? She couldn't tell. And that terrified her more than anything. The moment Derek walked into the courtroom, Bella knew he had something. It wasn't the usual smugness he wore like a second skin, it was something sharper, something more certain. He was a man who knew he was about to win. She gripped the armrest of her chair, pulse hammering as Derek's lawyer handed a thick folder to the judge. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that made every breath feel too loud. The judge flipped through the file, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up. Mr. Hawthorne, Mrs. Hawthorne, would you care to explain this? Bella's stomach nodded. Derek leaned back in his chair, the very picture of amusement. Your Honor, as you can see in that report, their marriage wasn't exactly born out of love. Bella's breath caught. The judge's gaze sharpened. Is this true? She didn't need to look at the papers to know what they said. Derek must have hired someone to dig into the courthouse mix-up, to track down every mistake, every inconsistency. And now he had exactly what he needed, the truth, neatly packaged and presented in a way that made her and Miles look like liars. The judge folded her hands. I'll ask again, was this marriage an accident? Bella opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She turned to Miles. He didn't look at her. That was the first sign something was wrong. Miles, who always had an answer. Miles, who could stare down anyone and remain impossibly calm, was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. Then, slowly, he exhaled and turned toward the judge. Yes. The word landed like a bomb. The judge's expression didn't change. And yet, you filed no annulment? Miles's throat bobbed. Bella still couldn't breathe. Derek was glowing with victory. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. Because my dear brother had a plan, didn't he? Miles's voice was quieter this time. I didn't file for an annulment because I didn't want to lose custody of Hazel. Bella felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under her. The courtroom blurred, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. She wanted to believe she had misheard him. That Miles couldn't, have just admitted to manipulating the situation like Derek had been saying all along. But he had. She forced herself to speak, even though her voice felt like it didn't belong to her. So it was all just a plan? Miles turned to her then, and it almost broke her. Because for the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look in control. He looked like he had just realized he was about to lose something important. The judge sighed, rubbing her temple. Given these new revelations, I'll need time to reassess the case. Her gavel came down. Custody ruling is delayed until further review. Delayed. Everything was unraveling. She barely registered the noise around her as the courtroom emptied. Derek strolled past her, leaning down just enough to whisper, "Told you this wasn't over." She didn't flinch. She barely even heard him. Because Miles was still sitting beside her, hands clasped together, his jaw clenched like he was bracing for impact. She turned to him, her voice hollow. How long were you going to let me believe this was real? Miles exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Bella. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Don't. She didn't wait for him. She walked out. The house felt too small when she got home. Too full of something she couldn't name. Miles arrived not long after, stepping through the door like he already knew what was coming. Bella was already waiting in the living room. Tell me, she said, arms crossed, voice trembling just enough to make her furious with herself. Tell me when this stopped being about Hazel and started being about you. Miles stood in the doorway, watching her carefully. I don't know. She let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. You don't know? He took a step closer, his voice quiet. I don't know when it stopped being a plan and started being something I couldn't walk away from. Her heart clenched, but she shoved the feeling down. She had spent years learning how to survive disappointment. She wasn't going to break now. She lifted her chin, eyes burning. Well, congratulations, Miles. He tensed. Bella. You figured out what it's like to be Derek. And then she walked upstairs, leaving him standing there alone. Bella sat in the judge's office, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her heart hammering like it wanted out of her chest. The judge looked at her over the rim of her glasses, unimpressed. You're requesting a modification to the custody case? Yes. Bella kept her voice steady. I want full custody. No shared parenting. No visitation. Derek can walk away, and I won't ask him for anything. The judge sighed, setting her pen down. Miss Sutton, that's a bold request given the circumstances. You're aware that courts prefer to grant shared custody when possible? Bella nodded. I know. And that, right now, your marriage situation is under review? I know that too. The judge leaned back in her chair. Then why do you think this will work? Bella swallowed, but her voice didn't waver. Because Derek doesn't want custody. He never did. He's using it as leverage against me, and I won't let him anymore. The judge was quiet for a moment. And Mr. Hawthorne? Bella didn't glance at Miles, who was sitting beside her, silent and still. Miles will be stepping back from the case. There it was. The final nail in whatever this had been. The judge studied her carefully, then sighed. All right. I'll hear your case. Derek showed up to the meeting in his usual way, too confident, too smug, as if all of this was still some game. Bella sat across from him in the mediation room, her hands resting on the polished table, her face unreadable. Miles sat behind her, saying nothing. The mediator cleared his throat. Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Sutton has proposed full custody. No visitation. Derek scoffed. And I assume she expects me to agree to that? Yes, Bella said simply. Derek grinned. Cute. Miles finally spoke. It's not cute, Derek. It's happening. Derek rolled his eyes. God, you really are exhausting. What is this, some power move? You get to play the hero? Miles's voice was steady. No, this is me walking away. And you should too. Derek turned to Bella, smirking. You think you've won something? Bella exhaled slowly. I think you're out of options. For the first time, Derek hesitated. Bella leaned forward slightly, her voice calm. You don't want to be a father. You never did. So why keep up the act? Why drag this out? What do you actually gain? Derek didn't answer. Miles's voice cut through the room like a blade. Because if you don't sign those papers, I will personally make sure you regret it. Derek turned toward him, smirk faltering. Miles smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was cold, calculated, the smile of a man who had spent years preparing for this moment. Derek swallowed. For the first time since this nightmare started, he looked trapped. The mediator pushed the documents across the table. Mr. Hawthorne, it's your decision. Derek didn't speak. Then, with a sharp exhale, he grabbed a pen and signed. Bella barely heard the mediator's confirmation. The words full custody granted barely registered. It was over. Bella stepped outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun warming her skin. She should have felt victorious. Instead, all she felt was tired. Miles stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "It's done," she murmured. He nodded. "Yeah." She turned to him, stomach twisting. "So, what now?" He gave her a small smile, but there was something final in it. "I pack my bags." Her chest tightened, but she didn't argue. She had spent so long fighting to do this alone. And now, she would. Miles zipped his suitcase slowly, dragging out the motion like it might somehow change the fact that he was leaving. The house was silent except for the dull hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old floorboards beneath Bella's feet as she stood by the front door, arms crossed so tightly it was like she was holding herself together. She hadn't spoken much since the courthouse, not about anything that mattered. But he knew what silence meant. Silence was a goodbye waiting to be said. He gripped the handle of his suitcase and exhaled. "I'll send someone to pick up the rest of my things later." Bella nodded once, but she didn't move, didn't even blink. He took a slow step forward, glancing around the house one last time. The place had been too small when he moved in, cluttered with Hazel's toys, with Bella's paperwork, with signs of a life that had functioned long before he barged in. But now, with his suitcase packed and his presence shrinking, it felt cavernous. Like something important had been taken from it. Like something important had been taken from him. He reached for the door. And then he heard it. A small voice, filled with certainty. "Dad." His whole body locked. He turned so quickly that his suitcase toppled over, but he barely noticed. Because Hazel was running toward him, her tiny arms outstretched, her face bright and sure in a way that made his chest tighten. She crashed into him, hugging him with everything she had. His breath caught. He had never heard that word attached to him before. Never thought he would. Slowly, carefully, he crouched down to her level. "What did you just say?" Hazel pulled back just enough to look at him, her big brown eyes full of trust. "You're my dad, right?" Something sharp and painful pressed against Miles's ribs. Behind them, Bella let out a shaky breath, but he couldn't look at her yet. His hands trembled as he placed them gently on Hazel's shoulders. He cleared his throat, but his voice still came out unsteady. "If that's what you want, kid, then yeah." "Yeah, I am." Hazel beamed, gripping his hand like she had no intention of letting go. And for the first time in his entire life, Miles understood what it felt like to belong somewhere. He turned slowly, finally meeting Bella's eyes. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name, something raw and heartbreaking and real. Like she had been trying not to believe in him, but Hazel had forced her hand. He inhaled deeply, then reached into his jacket, pulling out a neatly folded envelope. He held it out between them. Annulment papers. Bella didn't take them. His voice was quieter now. "You don't have to keep me." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then her gaze flickered to the envelope, and something changed in her face. She took a slow step forward, reaching out. But she didn't open it. She didn't even glance at the document inside. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked to the kitchen, where she pulled open a drawer, slipped the envelope inside, and shut it with a quiet click. Miles swallowed, his throat tight. Bella stood there for a second, her fingers resting lightly on the handle. Then she turned back to him, eyes burning. "I don't want to do this alone anymore." His breath hitched. She took another step closer. "I don't want you to go." His heart pounded. "Bella." "I don't know when it happened," she interrupted, shaking her head slightly. "Maybe it was when you stood up to Derek. Maybe it was when you helped Hazel with her homework. Maybe it was before that, when you walked into my life and made everything harder and better at the same time." She exhaled, her voice quieter now. "But I love you." Miles froze. He had thought about those words. He had imagined them, dreamed about them, let himself hope for them in moments of weakness. But he had never let himself believe in them. And yet, here she was. She let out a soft, breathy laugh, almost disbelieving. "I love you," she repeated, like it was something she was only just realizing herself. Miles closed the distance between them before he could stop himself. His hands found her waist, her hands slid up his chest, and then she kissed him. It wasn't careful. It wasn't hesitant. It was everything. Every fight they had ever had. Every sharp word and frustrated sigh and unsaid feeling that had been growing between them from the second they had met. It was the way she had pushed him away, the way he had stayed. It was choosing each other, despite everything. When she finally pulled away, her forehead rested against his, her breath warm against his skin. She smiled softly. "You were never a mistake, Miles." His throat was tight, his voice rough. "Neither were we." Behind them, Hazel giggled, then sighed dramatically. "Are you done kissing?" "Because I really want pancakes." Bella laughed, and the sound was light, like something had finally lifted. Miles turned to Hazel, grinning. "Pancakes, huh?" With smiley faces, she said firmly. Bella shook her head, nudging him playfully. "That's your fault." Miles slid an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I can live with that." Bella smiled up at him, choosing him all over again. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she saw a future where she didn't have to fight alone. And neither did he.